She's got a special interest in research while practicing the use of MI and GIM. GIM is the guided imagery in music, and particularly looking at substance misuse. Her biggest passion is music. She's one of 7 children, and singing and making music was part of her daily life. She was a music teacher before she became a music therapist, and she still enjoys teaching music, conducting choirs, arranging music, preparing people for music exams and Eisteddfods. Forever the student, she writes. I have completed an MA in positive psychology, and I'm currently starting research for a PhD. There is a
I'm
good
done.
marriage between positive psychology and music therapy, and combining these fields is beneficial. I can't remember whether you completed the PhD, Petra.
Yes, yes.
She has now.
May last
That's
year
right.
already. Yeah.
That's right. So that's all finished. But as you can hear, she is extremely experienced in a whole variety of musical fields. And I'm sure we're going to enjoy hearing her explaining how transcendental spiritual experiences with music and imagery led to post-traumatic growth. Over to you, Petra. She's on the steering committee of Music, Spirituality and Wellbeing International, and she's editing 2 of the new books in the collection that we're doing. So over to you, Petra.
Thank you, Prof. June, and thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. It's really a privilege. And I would love for you to interrupt if there's something that you are interested in or want to hear again in terms of the music or so on. So please, if it can be collaborative, it would be lovely. Okay, so the methodology of autoethnography is a personal story that should be told in such a way that it also has meaning for a larger audience. Walton says turning life's transformational experiences into narrative enables deeper perceptions to emerge as epiphanies. So my question in this autoethnography was, if growth is possible when you are grieving, which is certainly not only my question. I need to first give you a background of the MI method, music and imagery method. And then secondly, I shall take you on a journey with me on my personal music and imagery sessions journey. And then I think that when you have walked this journey with me, you'll understand why and how I got to post-traumatic growth as well as spiritual growth. There we go. Ah, it's taking a little bit of time here to change the slides. The music and imagery method, from now on, I will just talk about MI. It's music and imagery, of course, was developed by Dr. Lisa Summer. She was also my trainer, and music and imagery is a receptive music therapy method with a standard procedure. Receptive meaning listening and not making music. The client listens to music while drawing. Only one piece of music is used and repeated until the drawing is completed. Focusing on one image ensures containment and a deep emotional experience for the client, for the listener. The drawing can also serve as a helpful tool for discussion of the experience after the listening. Different levels are involved, starting from the resource finding level. So we find resources. What do I have that is strong? For example, patience or joy or open-mindedness. There's many. Spirituality, hope. And then these resources can be applied in the re-educating of the listener around their problem or issue. And lastly, this can lead to transformation. So we reconstruct our whole outlook on the issue, whatever that might be. In my case, it was trauma. So in an MI session, we focus on a single image while listening to a single piece of music, which can be repeated, as I said before. And the purpose is to contain the client or the listener. So it's not, I'm talking about my personal journey in this issue, But in guided imagery and music, for example, you are taking your client or the listener on a journey like watching a movie. While in music and imagery, you are containing the image like looking at a photograph. So you're not going anywhere, you're going deeper into this. You're looking at one image from different perspectives. The music that is chosen can be either the choice of the client or of the therapist, but we are privileged. We give privilege or preference to the client's music if possible. Of course, not all clients want to choose music. They say, can you choose music? Not all clients can say, okay, because we are talking about trauma here, I would like to listen to Dvorak. They don't have that insight, then you choose the music. But the goal is to listen and draw to the music in a new way, so that the client can understand and verbalize their feelings that are provoked and enhanced or developed by the music. The higher or deeper the level of MI is to gain insight into and a new perspective on an existing internal issue, such as anger, anxiety, guilt, sadness, loneliness, and the list goes on. The purpose is thus not to fix the matter, but to better understand or deal with it. Something that had previously been too overwhelming, and ultimately to become more honest about it personally on an emotional level. And that for me, it makes so much sense after having done this myself. If you have post trauma because somebody had died, you cannot bring him back, but you have to accept that death in some way that makes sense to you, and that gives you the possibility to move forward without always breaking down. So what made my journey transform? Sorry, this map. There we go. Transformational. Henry is my oldest brother, and although he was 17 years my senior, we had two very important things that connected us at a deep level from a very young age. The one was music, and the other was faith. I want to just explain the second picture. There is a little wristband that he gave me on his 70th birthday, quite telling about giving presents to your siblings on your birthday. And it is the verse of Philippians 4, verse 13, that is engraved on there. I can do anything through him that gives me the strength. So Henry was schizophrenic, and this diagnosis was one of the main reasons for me pursuing a career in music therapy. He was also diagnosed with a brain tumor early in June of 2020. This is what made my journey transformational. My music and imagery training course was that first week of June. As an introduction to our course, we were asked how we were. And I had to share that my brother was in ICU, that I was preoccupied with the fact that I could not visit him because of COVID restrictions, and also the fact that he unexpectedly deteriorated, and it was really worrying. He went in for a small procedure and he never came out of ICU. After this initial checking in, we got the first opportunity to draw to music. I'm going to play the music first, and then I will say a little bit more about oh no, about the image. After this check-in, we got this opportunity to draw with music, and the hands I drew represented both giving and receiving support. I labeled this mandala trusting in the balance of giving and receiving. Being in this group of MI students, sorry, I'm getting emotional, and facilitators reassured me that I was not completely alone. I was surrounded by people who cared and who understood, and their presence and the music connected me with an amazing tenderness. Our second day, um, we were giving practical examples of how to engage in a full music and imagery session where re-education was needed to be done. A session starts with a pre-talk, we also call that the prelude, in which we establish the issue with the client. And then we go on to the transition, which is choosing the music. So once we've decided what we are going to work on, we collaboratively decide what kind of music we would choose to work with. Then the induction follows, where we prepare the client, kind of taking them back to the issue, and the listening starts, the active listening, and then the drawing is happening while the listening is taking place, of course, and then it's demonstrated after, which we had and then after the listening, we have this talk with the client. And after this, of course, we had to practice. So in the instance, we all listened to the same music that the facilitator chose. It was Schumann's Five Stücke im Volkston, opus 102, Langsam. And this is the music. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. I have to say the initial, the pre-talk was about getting the group together, letting go of all your thoughts and busyness in your mind and focusing on the music only. So reflecting on the process of making this drawing while listening, these were my thoughts. I feel a little stuck, but there is some acceptance about the universality of this stuckness. It's not only me that's feeling this, but everybody is stuck in COVID-19. Also, there was a sense of letting go of the tension that the music and the circumstances have provoked. Yet, it's not gone. It's not fixed. It's not solved. It is still there and it's very real and even growing. So I called this picture sostenuto. Annelies, you have your hand up.
Yes, I was wondering because I read or you said that the music is played over and over until the drawing is finished. I was wondering how long these pieces were chosen, or if there was a specific length that was preferred in order for, also because I'm thinking about symphonies, for example, symphonies are like books. and
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
there are different chapters, different moods, different emotions, and so I was wondering if there was any particular criteria chosen by the therapist to pick the music for this specific exercise.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very valid and a very real question. Sometimes if the music is long, 8 minutes or 10 or 12, it will only be played once. But music and imagery is very suitable for people with no, let's say, musical inclination, if you want. People who listen to Elvis Presley and Beyonce and whoever who's not necessarily well known, or they don't know other classical music, or that's not their first love. And then it's kind of an educational, there we go, education. It's an educational point of departure where you also educate them in terms of how allow the music to make you, what do you feel when you listen to the music? We prefer not using music with text because the text tells you how to feel, or it is about love or sadness or loneliness. So listen to the music and listen to the support of the bass line and listen to which part in the music can you hang on to. So it's normally shorter pieces of music. I think this is about 4 minutes, the langsam. And also, of course, when you're in a group, not everybody is finished at the same time. So then there's also this, this was online because of COVID. In a group where you are live, it's easier for the facilitator to see when everyone is done. But in this case, you had to put in the chat, "I'm done," to the facilitator so that she could wait for everyone to finish off. And also, I'm not going to demonstrate that now because I'm scared I'm going to lose my whole image here, but we flipped down our laptops, the camera, so she could kind of see what was going on in each one's drawing. And it was really, it's a lovely experience to witness your client drawing while they're listening. And the repetition is so important, especially when you have someone who does not really understand necessarily what this is all about. They're done in 10 seconds. But I don't stop the music. I just stay quiet and you let them find another color and another place on the paper. And it is amazing how, with the repetition of the music, the pictures evolve. I am almost shy to show mine because I'm not an artist at all. But just the different greens here and so on. It was the circles, and then the spirals, and then another green over it, and I think I started with the gray because I was feeling gray. I wasn't feeling up to anything, and then the music kind of brought the cycles, this, so, and the color, and so it evolves. I hope that answers your question. Most of the times
Yes.
the music is short, and that's also part of the training, well, of the education of your client. If somebody says, "Yeah, but I want to listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony," one would say, "Okay, but you know what? That is GIM. That is when we are watching a film. It's going to take it's going to take long. But when we only look at a photograph, it doesn't take so long." So also that analogy works very well. Okay, I'm just going to see if I switch on a background light, if that might be it, because it's pitch dark in South Africa. Is that, no, it's not much better, but I feel so dark and alone here in my little flat. All right. Okay, shall we continue? Right, so this was a group practice, I want to say, listening to music while drawing, and then we had our discussion around it, and then we were put into groups of two, where one was therapist and one had the role of the client, and then we call that a dyad because it's two people. And my first focus, that was to allow myself to be vulnerable and to grieve, because I was not in a happy space with my brother. And then I realized that I felt frustrated because I was conflicted by two concepts. On the one hand, I was so vulnerable and sad and powerless with my brother being in the hospital in COVID. I can't see him. And my biggest issue was, does he know that we care because we don't come? How must he feel? How must he know that there are people out there who would really love to be there for him, but we can't? We're not allowed. And that was the one hand. And on the other hand, I grew up as a Christian where I was taught, and I'm sure many of us are, that you need to be strong and grateful. It was expected of me from a very young age. And this paradox, I believe it's real for many people. I said that already. I so I struggled with that in my head too. I wanted to be vulnerable and sad, but was I not supposed to be strong and and also the conflict between being the client and being a therapist. Now I need to be the client and let go. So that was quite a challenge. But then I chose a concerto because in a concerto, there's this dialogue between the instrument, the lonely, the vulnerable, and the orchestra, which is the strong and the containing and the holding space. So the music I chose was Boccherini's cello concerto in B flat major. And Annalisa, you had a very good question there. I do not know how long it is, but I do know that you are given permission to take as long as you like. So even if it is 5 or 6 or 8 minutes and you play it twice, so be it. And if it's shorter, 3 or 4 minutes, you're going to play it 4 or 5 or 6 times. That's the difference in the end. So in this concerto, the long melodic lines are predictable, stable, and the cello solo and the string orchestra supporting it with a clear meter. So it kept me safe. So I'm going to just play a bit of that, and then I'll talk about this image. Prof. June, I'm sorry if you can't hear the music. It is so beautiful. It's taking me right back to that moment. And I'm going to interrupt myself here. When you are finding music, the first thing, okay, I said I feel vulnerable and I want something that can support the sadness. So what comes up? So I always ask first, which instrument would you like to try? And for me, the cello is always so containing. And for another person, it would be the flute or a choir, maybe, or whatever. And so you listen to snippets of different pieces until something feels right. And that's also amazing about this method. Something comes up and it feels right. It's marvelous. Okay, so although this music contained no piano at all, I started drawing a piano, the keys, and I think it is because it was the first instrument that both my brother and I learned to play. But then I also felt while I was drawing that I had to let out some of this frustration in terms of this sadness and this having to feel strong and what. So I started drawing those black triangles at the ends of the keys. And even that felt quite contained, and therefore I added the green half circle with some new growth, and I labeled the picture comfortable with the uncomfortable. The paradox in the drawing and in the even the title. And this realization was contrary to what I expected, quite strengthening, and it gave me hope amidst of this feeling of confusion about my own emotions. For me, this picture meant being more honest about my real feelings. I think earlier I would have started maybe with the little flowers at the bottom or just the piano, but here I gave myself permission in the music to let go a little bit, yet I felt contained. It's transformational. Okay. So one of the main purposes of music and imagery is to use music that matches closely the feeling associated with the issue, if you want to call it that, for lack of a better word. One needs to demand the emotional honesty of oneself and wait with an attitude of expectancy. Because remember, this is not about fixing. This is about understanding and accepting and getting a new perspective. And that leads to a state of total receptivity. It is more important to discover that it feels great letting go of control in favor of finding the solution or being in control. It give oneself over to the music to get closer to oneself. This is in line with the concept that Rose Marishan says in research with soul in mind. It's for me, it's such a beautiful that breaking between and search. Research your soul. So it's the double meaning there. It's beautiful, and that's exactly what happens when you sit with the music and you allow the music to search for you, with you, to find your soul again. That research. She says that in that research with the hyphen, proceeds in depth and from the depth is about finding that what has been lost, forgotten, neglected, marginalized, or otherwise left behind. And in this way, we get to know ourselves, and then we can realize who we are and in our life world, in our daily living. Through interacting with a group and facilitators, I learned that it was important to find the tension within myself. Therapists, I don't know how many of you are therapists, but we tend to have this savior thing, and we're always strong, and we never, there's a big problem if you cannot see your own tensions. So one must own it, name it, and stay with it. And that's also where the music is very helpful, especially in the repetition. You stay with it. You can't run away. And one must move through the difficulty to integrate it into one's wider experience. Okay, so my brother died early the next morning, on the 4th morning of our training. In my session on that day, I chose the original Joshua Bell version of Anna's theme from the soundtrack of a motion picture, The Red Violin. I do not know if you're familiar with it, but it's absolutely haunting music, and I can't get enough of it. I do hope that you can feel something about that loneliness, that sadness, and it was acute, of course, in that moment. The choice helped me to own and accept my sadness. I felt so alone, and this is clear in the image. I realized that I need to take responsibility for this feeling and not try to negate it. I gained deep insight into my sadness. The fact was that I felt isolated. The music conveyed this sense of being isolated, and it felt like an allowance to be alone, an allowance to grieve. The music was like a hand on my shoulder. The music helped me being alone by accompanying me. Another paradox. In this case, I felt like the music was identifying with me. And as we're in an art group, I'd like to say this is one of the images that it's if I could draw myself with a hand on my shoulder, that's what it would have been. But it was this cold ice feeling. This image is called Alone in the Snow. There's supposed to be a little snowman there, and that snowman was me. I was ice cold and completely alone, and it was just white. And yeah, so the imaging is so important, especially for what I say afterwards. I gained deep insight and da da da. If it wasn't for the image, I don't know if I would have been able to say it. The image helps with the analysis of the feeling and how one experienced it in that moment while listening and while drawing. During this difficult time after the training, personal MI sessions had a significant impact on my emotions and functioning as I was still grieving. And personal MI sessions are, it's our homework when you train. You have to do sessions on your own. So you have to kind of check yourself. How am I feeling? What is my issue today and in this moment? And find music that suits that emotion, that feeling that you were yearning, and then draw with it. So it was difficult for me to find right music. I realized that this feeling had very deep, almost primordial roots. I don't think I have ever mourned in my life. I lost my dad at the age of 15, and we were not allowed to cry because he was suffering and now he was free. So that kind of message in your head, and now it's my brother, and he was my other father because he was 17 years my senior. And all of a sudden, I felt like I could scream, and I had the permission to do it. So I had to find that primal scream almost. So I looked for music with a mythical or an archetypal symbolism and sound around it. As Jung suggests, archetypes are the link with our past. So I found the best music for this in the old Sami yoik tradition of Scandinavia, the Scandinavian music that had a shamanic healing and an understanding tone. And the music that I chose is called Gula Gula. And I'm going to just say what happens in the drawing and then play the music. During one of the listening experiences, because I listened to it over and over, I felt that I could draw. There were also sessions where the song, her voice is so moaning. It has a moaning quality, yet empathetic. And it says, I feel with you, I feel for you. And the music gave me permission to cry. So I had sessions where I didn't draw, I was just crying. So in the end, when I did feel I could draw today, the ancient feel of the music evoked an atmosphere of sitting at a fire. So I started with a black, but soon the flames were big and bright for me, with sparks in the foreground, and each spark starting a new possible fire. And during the process and the burning, that was stimulating and it was also stimulating the burning pain. But something was new and something was happening, and it could go on forever and ever. So the small new fires also symbolize new possibilities for me in different dimensions. And the important message for me was that there was life after death. There was a new reassuring message in the midst of my sadness. Yeah, let me first play the music. I'm getting carried away. This was an example of a personal music and imagery session that can be a transformative growth session. Music became the catalyst for the change, owning that although the tears have subsided, the sadness remained acute was difficult. And I struggled with moving forward still. It's this opening up, and it's this new life, and it's all this, what you can see in my hands now. I can't help myself, but still, I wasn't okay. I was better, but to be honest, if I was honest, in my previous "you have to be okay" situation, I would have pretended I'm okay. But I realized you're not. It's difficult. You're still struggling to move forward. So I felt a little bit as if I was trapped in a maze and I'm going around in circles. And this feeling of going around in circles brought to mind the windmills of my mind. So the one thing leads to the other. There's the text, and I will play the Barbara Streisand version.
Round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on an ever spinning reel, like a snowball down a mountain or a carnival balloon, like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, like a clock whose hands are sweeping.
Oh yeah. So I felt I was in this maze. Where was I? Yes. And but then because I was training, you speak to your supervisor quite often, and she said, remember, we don't really go with text. Try and find something else. But I was stuck on this. I wanted to do this. So I found a version of the same song that had no text. And to my surprise, here comes the cello again. It was because when you listen to something in the first time, we are so fortunate in having things like Spotify and Apple Music where you can put in Windmills of My Mind instrumental version, and you get 20 to pick from, and you've never heard them yourself. And it's beautiful how you can find just the right music. So in this case, although my image is a maze, and that's how I felt, and that's what I told my supervisor, there's these different broken lines and various branches from the core. I called it a labyrinth. But the shift happened during the process of listening. The labyrinth is a continuous path which leads to the center as long as there's a forward movement. And the autumn leaves to the left, turning green to the right-hand side, happened subconsciously. It was not planned. It just, with the listening, the leaves turned into colors more to, and actually in and out. So that was quite, this is quite one of my more, I'm proud of, of this image. It says more about, it says a lot about what I felt, while other images are so simple. So this was a direct precursor for the next session, where I experienced a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for life. And the music that I used there, I will play for you. So this one was called Beauty in Grief. Another spiral, but a lot of growth and a lot of pink. After working through the loss of my brother in such difficult circumstances, I could look at life differently. For me, having this therapeutic tool, music and imagery, was certainly very helpful in my post-traumatic growth. I found myself immersed in the music, which led to deeper connection. I became closer to myself, closer to God, and I had more compassion for others, and I felt resilient. So there were a lot of things happening in my life. There are the words, the connection, the resilience, the compassion. So I realized in this process and in writing this autoethnography that, yeah, you have grown through the trauma, and that is what you call post-traumatic growth. So my transformation became clear to me, and I knew that growth was possible, even in this painful circumstance. I want to end this presentation with one more example. The introduction to the music creating a pulling feeling within me. And when the melody and the piano started, it felt as if I could fly. The music changes later on, and it was clear that there was a struggle, but this was resolved, again, taking me higher and higher. Of course, I can't play the whole piece. I want to close by saying, from my process, I want to close my process in this presentation by saying I was, and I still am, soaring. And it feels a little bit like that phoenix rising from the ashes. So I am hoping that in this presentation and sharing my personal experience, can help others to also find ways to take self-care really seriously. Even without musical training, we all know what music works for us and when. And even with no so-called artistic skills, we know what visual idea we want to portray when we start listening on a deeper level. And when we feel better, when we feel well in terms of our physical health, but also mental and especially spiritual health, we are better equipped to live healthy and help others who are not. And that is my story.
Well, thank you, Petra. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad to hear that. And there is the link to the article and my email address, but I can also share that later if you want, if you'd like to share that. I'm going to stop the share now so that we can see each other properly. There. Okay.
Who would like to share anything or make any comments about the sharing? Oh, Annalisa.
Yeah, I just wanted, well, first of all, I came onto this meeting with my mind focused on a separate issue, work issue, and I was really worked up as it happens. And now I feel so much calmer and so much more like I don't want know if the word focus is the right word, but much like my brain has stopped going like that. And the music definitely, it's not just the music, but your pace. The
Thank you.
pace with which you delivered this presentation was very, to me, for me, was very good, is what I needed in this moment in order to be present. And the other thing I noticed when you put on, I forgot now the title of the music, the one with the violin.
Yeah.
What I don't know if other people felt this way, but I always wondered why violin is used to deliver particularly painful emotions, like almost like screaming. And while the violin was going to the higher scales, the higher pitches,
Mm.
I suddenly realized that that's the sound that we make when we cry,
Right.
like desperately, when it's a
Yeah.
desperate cry, when it's, when the breath is actually leaving you and
Yes.
you can't breathe back. You're just exhaling and you can't inhale. So
Yes.
that's the thought I had in that moment.
I feel so, I feel almost overwhelmed to just hear this because I said it in the presentation. That moment, it felt to me like the music understood me. Never mind me understanding the music. And it's exactly that. It's that connection. It's exactly right. Yeah, it's true.
It's like
Yeah.
an
I
emotion.
think it's interesting. I think it's interesting how the sounds that we make for music are refining sounds that we use. Um, I mean, the classic example of what you've talked about, Annalisa, those of you who know the Amadeus, the Mozart film,
Yeah.
and those of you who know the Magic Flute, Mozart is dying, and his mother-in-law is telling him what a rotten son-in-law he's been. He's lying on his bed, and this woman is in the door going, ah! And so, and then suddenly in the soundtrack of the film, it flips into the Queen of the Night, who is in the Magic Flute. She sings very high. It's one of the most challenging heights, going and those very high notes that the soprano sing. In order to get them, what you have to do is to refine a scream. You get them by screaming, and then you have to refine the scream into musical notes. And so that it's that moment in Amadeus, which you're talking about also, Annalisa, where music is in a sense very close to the sounds that we make, which we don't call music. They're unrefined. And that's particularly true of a tradition called, I don't know, I don't know whether they're called keening, the keening Irish tradition, where it starts in a sense with a sob and then gradually turns into a
Yeah.
tune. I don't know whether
Yeah.
you know that
The
tradition, do you?
the Scandinavian yoik, which I used one of, it's the same. It's that
Some-
groaning, moaning sound, which turns into music. Yeah, it's very
You want to come in?
wrenching.
Do you want to come in, Alison?
Yeah, that keening, it's as though it comes from the gut. It rises from your whole inside, the whole way through. Yeah, it's a tremendous sort of expression of emotion, you know. But it's not coming from just here. It's coming right from the inside, right down to your gut.
Yeah, from your
Can you
gut.
do it?
Yeah.
Can you do it?
No,
Have you done it?
No, I think you need to be in a particular scenario to do it. It just doesn't happen. It's very much that keening that we're talking about. It's very much a death keening. It comes with that. And you hear it very, very clearly. At that stage, I would have heard it. I've never actually done it myself, but I would have been aware of it as that sort of sense of coming from really the depths of your being.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm glad you come in, Christine. But there were also in Greece, there were choirs who were paid to make it. Wasn't the same as the Irish keening, but were women's lamenting choirs. Unfortunately, the early church, the fathers of the early church, tried to ban them unsuccessfully. I think they probably did the same in Ireland, actually. This was not regarded as, it was regarded as beyond the religious pale. But that similarly, I gather that these women's choirs are still employed in Greece in some part in order to do a similar thing, the keening. Christine, do come in.
Thank you so much. It's really interesting because I didn't know what to expect, I must admit, when I decided to sign up for this, because I'm interested in listening to music. But the question I wanted to ask was around, do you think drumming, because that's very much an African kind of way of communicating, I suppose, do you think it would have the same effect?
Yeah.
Well, yes, I do use drumming. As I said in the beginning, this is it's more what is the word? Receptive music where we are listening. But when you can have exactly the same issue. I can come to you and I have had this traumatic experience. My brother had just died. How can I get rid of it? And we can do it on the drums. For sure, definitely. Yeah, and I use drums very often. I use, especially with addiction recovery, that feeling of that group feel that I'm not alone, because I think addicts feel very alone and pressed down. They're not good enough, kind of, if it makes any sense. So, and also that the fact that it is not, you don't have to be a musician to drum. You can drum if we have a heartbeat, so we can drum. So it's empowering, same as this, where you can choose your own music. It's very empowering. So yes, yes, yes to drumming, certainly. Yeah. That would obviously, because it is creating the music, the imaging won't happen. The imaging will most probably happen up here in your mind, but you won't have the piece of paper afterwards. Although you could say afterwards, okay, let's draw. What have you experienced while you were drumming? So it's not a no-no, but to do the process with drumming and live is just, it could work just as well, definitely. Thank you for that question, Christine.
Well, I think it's an interesting one because when I've done drumming workshops with people, that particularly postmenopausal women who often feel they've lost their power, they buy a drum and they find that if they come home at night and drum for a quarter of an hour, that their energy rises.
Their power
they
back.
can get the energy up by actually drumming.
Yeah, yeah.
Annalisa coming in.
Yeah, I was actually, you just reminded me of a question I had earlier. You mentioned that you began this therapy in a group, and that
Yeah, the training. Yeah,
having a group was very helpful because you found you had support around you. And
absolutely.
I was wondering how, I don't know if you can quantify it because obviously it's not a quantifiable feeling, but uh, on balance, what was more helpful, being in a group or thinking of the experience of listening to music by yourself, doing this exercise by yourself? So on balance, which one was more powerful to you to help you through
Well,
your trauma?
you are right. It's difficult to quantify, but I can tell you one thing. It was far more difficult to do it on my own. You know, to accept the emotion, to find music, to push through and not to kind of give up. Oh no, I'll do it tomorrow. I can't do it now. That was far more difficult because of the lack of support. But I think because I had to, and I had to push through, that brought along the growth. So it's a very difficult balance. It's not that the one is better than the other, but the support means so much. And I can tell you one thing: these is somebody. Our group is somebody from Ireland, somebody from Scotland, somebody from Spain, somebody from Canada, and myself. We're from all over the world, and we feel supported, and we are the best Zoom basis to train for this course, you know. So that support will never leave. I've also done a trio ethnography with two of my colleagues, explaining this, you know, how do we choose music and how do we accept each other and how do we so it's a different presentation altogether. But so in that sense, the support is very valuable, but the growth comes when you're alone because you have to be brave. And in a group, it's easier to kind of, they put you in cotton wool. The group puts you in cotton wool, and you feel very, very welcomed and cared for, and that helps, of course. But the deep growth, I think, I can't say it won't happen in a group because the group was only for a week, the course was only for a week, and I had to go on my own. But I think there's a positive for both, definitely. And I would, if somebody says, but I don't have the guts to do it alone, I would definitely recommend, well, then join a group. If we think about groups, you know, post-trauma groups or mothers with autistic children groups, or we have those groups. We need that. We need to be heard. We need to be heard by people who understand us and who feel the same or similar. So there is definitely a positive to both sides. But I can't say, I can now say in my personal sessions, the growth took place because I had to sit with it. But I can't say it wouldn't have happened in a group. That would be unfair of me because I wasn't in a group.
There's
Does
a
that make
question
sense?
from Ken in the chat. During the facilitation session, is the gender difference happening in terms of music preference and shape drawn on the paper?
Well, I think it can't be helped. You know, there will always be I'm female and you are male, or we are both female, or I am young and you are old. You know, there's always that at play. But that is also the beauty of music and imagery, I want to say. With GIM, I don't know who of you are familiar with GIM, the one I explained being a journey and like watching a movie. It's long music. That music is always chosen by the therapist, and it's very Western. It's very classical music, and it does exclude a lot of people. And that is where music and imagery started, so that people can bring their own music. and that they can draw with their own music, and that they can look at their own issues from different perspectives. And sometimes I have a client looking at 3 or 4 different issues with the same music, or at the same issue with different kinds of music. So yes, it will definitely come into play. And if we are going to pretend it's not there, I think we're lying to ourselves. But that's the thing, to say it openly, to be aware of it. It's in the room. I'm a man, you're a woman. I am old, I'm white, you are black. Whatever the case may be, that is very important. Thanks for that question. Yes, it definitely. And also, I want to add to that, Ken, that in the drawing, I'm still a little bit iffy, shy about showing my images, because I'm not an artist at all. But I've come to know and come to learn that it's not about the product. It's about that process and what happens inside. And I can explain what happened by showing you my picture. And that is what I'm trying to tell my clients as well. It's not whether you can draw or not. It's about being focused in the moment, because that also helps. I'm drawing, I can't look around or think of other things. I am very, very present in my own issue, in my own mind, and I hear things in the music that I've never heard before. And that is pink, and this is black, and that is this shape or that shape. So it's very, I always say to clients, if you don't want to draw, if you say you can't draw, this is not about it. Just try it, because in the end of the session, you can show me I was here, and you can take it home. And that is important. So yeah, it comes up, certainly. Yeah. It's like transference and counter-transference. We cannot ignore it, and we can't pretend it's not there.
Is there anything you want to add, Ken, or is that answering for you? Is there anything you wanted to add, Ken?
Oh, thank you. Thank you for taking my question. And so I understand what's happening in the facilitating session. Yeah, exactly. Similar thing that happening in the Japanese situation. My friend in my OD community frequently use Japanese calligraphy action research in the devastated area, like a huge earthquake hit northeast coast of Japan and also northwest of Japan. So he went to the area and put on the white paper and write a Japanese character on the paper, but the writing process is not the purpose of the action research. It's just to focus on the writing process itself. It's a healing process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether either of you have thought of taking a video of the process of doing it, so that you can actually follow the process of it, because that would be very interesting to see where people start, how they start, and you see the journey in the painting. And that's in a sense the big difference between music and art and painting, is that painting, you see it all together.
It's the product.
But you very seldom see the process that gets there. But music can only exist in time. It has to have a period of time. And that's the big difference between the two art forms. That the journey is always present in the music. But I don't see it. I mean, I can if I look for a long time at a picture, but you haven't got that process in the artwork. So I don't know whether, Lila, you want to say anything about that.
Well, the only thing I wanted to say, I mean, well, a number of things, but, there is something very natural about this methodology, because I know people that really love to draw when they hear music. So, it's so organic almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and some artists as well, I mean, use music to inspire them.
Yeah.
And there have been many artists in history that worked with music specifically. And so that's and I'm sure that they were aware and are aware of these feelings that you have been describing, and also some kind of a process that is taking place within when
Yeah.
you are doing it. What I'm very curious about is your role as a therapist. So when you, for example, have one client, and are you working one to one with
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your role as when basically in this process? Because
Okay.
I'm asking it because I would like to compare it, for example, to movement therapy, where there is a very particular role in some methodologies to the
Yes. Yes.
therapies. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a very
Before
structured
you answer,
method.
Petra,
So,
um,
sorry.
can
Yeah.
I just welcome Marilena? You've come into the middle of a session, Marilena, and
I
Petra's
did.
been talking about guided imagery, and we're now in the discussion of it. I'm sorry.
No, I do apologize because I didn't listen to the sound, and so I mismatched the timing. So please, I joined very happily. Go ahead.
Thank you.
You
Petra,
it's being
do carry on
recorded,
with
so
your
you can
answer.
watch it later. Yeah, because this is such a structured method, it's very safe. And I think the whole idea of Lisa Summer was to make a patient or a client feel safe. So the client would come in with they've made an appointment with a therapist for whatever reason. So first we talk about that. And then the first thing that I would do as the therapist is ask, okay, so how can we look at this problem? What do you have? This is now the first level, right? The resource. So which resources do you possess that you can use to help you with this problem? So we look at strengths because people are very quick to criticize themselves. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this. So we'll ask, what are you good at? I'm a good mother. Why are you a good mother? Because I'm patient. Okay, patience. Let's take that concept. Now it's a very difficult concept. Patience. How are we going to make this concept practical and put it onto paper, for example? So I would say, okay, in terms of music, what sounds patient to you? Would it be fast? Would it be slow? So in that way, you lead the client to find a piece of music that suits their resource or their issue, and we listen to, okay, and that's why we call it pools. We have a pool of music, and we also have a pool of music that is very containing, very not much movement in the music, very predictable. The tempo is steady, and then it grows, of course. So I have an example of a piece of music, and the client would say, but I'm thinking of that. Because when they've heard something, they have an open door. So then we listen to a piece of that, and that might spark something else. So after 3 or 4 pieces of music, they choose. So your role is to kind of bring them into it. And then the second important thing is now we've listened to different pieces of music, and we're far beyond what we started with when you entered this room. So I need to bring you back. So I would relax them. They sit down with a paper, they close their eyes, and I ask them to breathe, and I ask them to think about this wonderful resource that they have. And when the music starts and you're ready, open your eyes and start drawing. And then my role is to witness
To
until the client is done. I don't say anything. And then when they say, I'm done, this is my image, then we discuss it. And also with questions, not leading, because clients are very clear. We know what's going on that piece of paper. So we can actually analyze it ourselves. And that's also very empowering. Very empowering. Yeah. So does that make
What I
sense?
thought is, of course, I mean, yes, it's very helpful to hear it and to understand how you work, because what I felt is that the examples of your process that you gave felt very advanced. What I'm trying to say is that they were extremely deep and painful and difficult. Like, I mean, I'm sure we could all feel your pain, your grief. It was there through the images, through the movement. Sorry, the images and the music. I mean, it was very powerful emotions and very deep. So what I'm trying to say is that when someone is coming with serious issue or with a trauma, I guess you need to take it in stages, because something like this can, I mean, shatter a human being. I mean, it's really tough emotions.
This was also this is the advanced training as well.
That's
so yes,
it.
you
It
start
feels
with you start with beautiful things, joy, hope, gratitude. You give vocabulary to positive emotions, if I can call it that. And then when the client is strong enough, you can use those positive emotions and to move to challenging emotions. But it is a process. It's not and one needs to be very careful to not judge their choice of music, and to also not press your music onto them. That's the whole beauty of this, is to use their music and to allow them to choose their music. But it's very important that they know why.
I think the important thing of what you've said is that, in a sense, the spirituality of music, and where I stand on this, is a relationship between the person and the music. There isn't spiritual music. The spirituality is in the right relationship.
It's your relationship. Yes, true.
Between it. And I mean, I was familiar with the Helen Bonny guided imagery, and you're absolutely right. It goes back to Christine's question that a lot of these therapeutic devices came from Europe. And for example, if you take music therapy itself, it demanded somebody could play a piano, for example. And there's a very interesting school developing, say, in the Caribbean, and saying, well, let's use steel pans for it, rather than using Tchaikovsky and so on. And that what you've done with the music imagery, that removing the guided imagery to music, which was all classical music, I think has reinforced this development of spirituality residing not in the art form, but in the relationship between the art form and the person who's using the art form. Did you want to come in, Christine? I see you nodding.
Yes, that was definitely an area that I was thinking about, because although I asked the thing about drumming earlier, I meant drumming as the form of music. The people do relate to drumming, and I've been to many kind of events where people do get emotional when they hear, a group of people drumming and doing a piece, and whatever the case may be, and it kind of links back to African spirituality. So it's looking outside of the Western kind of way of doing things, and knowing that it can be transferred to other instruments or other ways of hearing music, I think, is that's what the reason I was nodding. The other thing is, I've got to go. I've got another meeting and I've got to travel. So thank you ever so much for all of this, and I hope that I'll attend future meetings. So thank you ever so much, everybody.
Lovely.
And bye for now.
Thank you, Christine.
Bye.
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 Yeah.
I realized that one of the things I should have captured from my son, going back to the earlier bit, when he was very small, well, about 4 or 5, and he was very much a loner, he did, and I've not got no record of it, what I called singing drawing. So he'd be in his bedroom with a piece of paper going, he would spend an hour and a half completely entranced with humming and drawing pictures on the paper. And I just think, as a researcher, wouldn't it have been wonderful? I had
Yeah,
this
I would
child
have.
in my house doing this remarkable thing, and I got no record of it. And I called it singing drawing and so on. Sorry, do come in, Alice.
No, when you're talking there about the choice of music, I was reminded of I was doing a Lectio Divina type thing with a group of youngsters, teenagers, sort of 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And I actually did it with music on one occasion. They saw me with my CD player and think, oh, we're getting music. I said, yeah, but it's not Beyonce. And but what I decided to use was something that was totally outside their remit, not even your Tchaikovskys or anything else. I used Native American.
Native American.
Because they wouldn't like to use, if I used Irish traditional music, that would have been too close to the bone, so to speak. They wouldn't have, if I'd used even classical music, they would have heard that before. But I used this Native American music and I did it on the 4 readings, the 4 listenings. They practically gave me the title of the piece of music at the end.
Wow. Wow.
So I was able to say to them, now you can go and do it with Beyonce's music.
That's so clever.
So it was just getting them totally out, something that was so totally unfamiliar. And yet I was able, and the methodology, and so June and Donalisa and Neil have heard this from me before, the methodology I was using, I had adapted Lectio Divina, the 4 readings of Lectio Divina for their age group. So it was listen with your imagination. And what do you want to say to God out of that? And then listen with your rational mind. It's a second reading. And what is it you want to say to God now? And then listen with the third reading was listen with your feelings and emotions. So what's been stirred up at that level? And what do you want to say to God? And then when we listened to it a 4th time, I said, do it a 4th time because the word is made flesh. And we don't want these words just to remain on paper or the music to remain just in the ether. So how are you being invited to respond?
Wow.
Yeah.
And then I got them
That's
to share.
amazing.
That's really interesting, Alice.
Sure.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But what fascinated me was that they practically gave me the title of the piece of Native American music. I'll never forget that.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about that is because I've been preparing a seminar on the Mi'kmaq people who live on the Canada, the Canadian coast, and the small drum and the big drum are central, and they regard it as the sound of the earth. And they still have it still has its spiritual overtone. So you come to hear the earth as the drums sound. And so I'm interested that they could recognize that in the music.
Yeah.
And was it the heartbeat drum you were using for that?
In
the Native American?
It was a CD I had of Native American music. And
was it a steady beat?
Oh, yeah.
That's right, because they tend, rather than the djembes, which have got lots of patterns, the indigenous people have got this steady drum beat behind. It's very simple. It's a very simple drum compared with the djembe. It's just boom, 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 boom.
But I don't remember the name of the piece myself, but it was something to do with the morning or daybreak or the rising sun. So, something in that area. But, it was the fact that these youngsters actually identified it for what it was.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And Ken, you're adding your thoughts here in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. It's just my experience in Japan. So when I was in the Nara city, in Japan. So I frequently met some friend in the Nara city. So one of my friends in the Nara city has been running a special therapy institution for those who suffering a psychological withdrawal. A lot of Japanese kids intentionally withdrawn from the school classroom because so they hate to join in a public school, and then so gradually they let them out of the classroom, and but at the same time, those students, those kids want to get out of the psychological withdrawal situation. And then, so at that point, so government kicks in therapeutic, musical therapeutic facilitation. And so singing a song with a group, a particular song. And so that the group music training is a good segue to get out of psychological withdrawal, because I sing a song and so the small people sing together in the workplace. And gradually, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Everybody joined and sing a song, the same song. And finally, so audience come to the room and everybody's clapping hands, see, you made it. And that process create identity to standing up for
Oh,
that's my
I mean, it's
experience.
wonderful to hear, that dimension. I don't know whether you can put in the links to that center. Can I just, before we close, because we're very close to the closing time, say that Music, Spirituality and Wellbeing International is going to put out a call for papers on music, death and dying. So if anybody has, it doesn't have to be an academic paper. It can be a reflection. I didn't know whether the keening, you could, the way you spoke about that, or whether that center is doing anything in that area. And we don't know about Marlena, but, we should be putting a call out for papers. That'll be the next book. So if anybody has any ideas about music, death and dying, either in the rituals or in the way in which grief is handled, or indeed those people who think that music contacts the ancestors, which, to go back to the indigenous music of America, they see in there that they're contacting the ancestors, that the ancestors are playing the drums with them, and they're also contacting the as yet unborn with the drum, and so on. So I think, if I don't know, Annalisa might help me to put the call up in our group here in some way once the call is out, and so on. So what I need to do is to thank Petra. I mean, it's been a wonderful discussion. I mean, who could imagine a discussion from all these different dimensions and cultures and the cultural assumptions that we do? I mean, wonderful. And Petra, that's due to your courage to share your personal journey and to show your so well-developed practice. So thank you for starting us off on this route, which I'm sure is one that we shall come back to over and over again. So we're very, very grateful to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.